Hey everyone, welcome to the TopCyberPro podcast. I'm founder and CEO of TopCyberPro.com, Jim West, and I have a wonderful guest today on the podcast. We're going to talk about some really cool stuff, and we're going to try not to get too deep dive technically and try to like lose people in the deep end of the swimming pool because that can happen sometimes for certain topics as we get into like security research and threat intelligence. But we're going to try to explain it like I'm five, if you will. But we have a wonderful person who is a senior threat intelligence researcher and also, a lot of hats. So a certified dark web investigator, among many other hats and roles that she wears. But we have Tammy Harper, correct? So
Correct.
Tammy Harper's on with us today. So Tammy, tell us a little bit about yourself and the kind of work that you do.
Hi. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm very excited to be here. I am a senior threat intelligence researcher at Flare, which is a continuous emerging threat management platform. So we monitor the dark web for new types of information and data leaks and stuff like that. And what I do at Flare, or basically on my day-to-day, is I am always researching for what's next, what's coming up, who's talking, what new threats are going to be going to be making the news type of thing. So I'm also really involved in a bunch of different projects. One of the projects that my favorite project that I am most known for is I work on, among other people, I work on a project called Ransomlook, which is basically a ransomware platform or in service that makes sure that it keeps all the onions up to date from Tor, and it basically allows you to see the latest victims that pop up from these gangs.
Yeah. And she said a whole lot there. So let's kind of dissect it piece by piece because, folks, you've heard of ransomware. We've heard about like school systems. We've heard about banks. We've heard about almost every organization on the planet has fallen victim to a ransomware attack where basically their databases, their data, their systems get encrypted and therefore they have to pay usually like in Bitcoin some kind of ransom so they can get a decryption key so they can get their data back, right? So they basically have their data hijacked by a group or somebody else through someone clicking a link, or social engineering, phishing attacks, or so forth. Whatever, it doesn't matter the avenue by which it happens, but it happens to a lot of organizations. And so, a lot of these datas, this database, any data that's been exfilled, or we hear about data breaches all the time, where so many records were stolen, and a lot of times these things end up into the dark web. So I want to take another step back too, because a lot of folks are like, they might have heard about the dark web. So just as a quick explain like I'm five, the internet, like your Google, your whatever.coms, that's kind of like the surface net. Think of like if you're thinking of the ocean, it's like the top of the water, like the first few feet that most people would explore in the internet is that surface level. And then you have kind of a range, the level that's called the deep web. And the deep web is usually things that are hidden behind like paywalls or subscription-based type services where you have to like pay to access or pay to play or whatever terms that people want to use. But they're a little bit, restricted access, if you will, in a way where you can get to some like scientific journals, analytical data, and so forth that is collected. Then you have below that is the dark web. And then what makes it the dark web? Well, first thing is you just can't use your regular Chrome, Edge, or typical internet browser. You have to use a special browser tool called the Onion router or Tor, a Tor browser. And so some folks might be like Tor browser. Well, if you're newbie to it, the most easiest way to get to it is a thing called Tails OS, but I don't want to go down that pathway right just yet. But there are tools that you can use, and the easiest one for most people to get familiar with is Tails OS. But the browser itself is called the Tor Onion. So when she mentions she keeps onions updated, this is critical because a lot of times, if you are familiar, you just started discovering the dark web, one of the quick things you'll notice is that a site that was up a week ago can go offline at any time. Certain sites will only come up and down at certain times. So people think like Google's available 24/7. You're right. But when it comes to certain onions or sites in the dark web that have a different extension, they might have very limited visibility for various reasons. One of them is for anonymity, evading government detection and tracking and so forth, because there's a lot of like a lot of bad things are happening down there in the dark web. So she's an expert into one, assessing it, being able to, and there's so much information, just like Google and the internet on our surface level has so much information. There's also a lot of garbage there as well as down there, but there's a lot of bad actors operating in this space. So as a researcher, she's got to filter one through this massive deep ocean, if you will, because there's a lot of stuff down there, and have to, has to use a lot of specialized tools and tactics to be able to shift through that information to get to the information to where that's relevant for her to take, what we call actionable intelligence. And that's part of the whole CTI or cyber threat intelligence aspect of her role. So it takes a lot of knowledge and a lot of understanding of that to do what she does. So just to kind of put it in perspective, it's like searching for the Titanic, looking for those, ships, those shipwrecks that are down there that have, these holds of data. And so again, if I could only just say the amount of sophistication you have to have, because also you got to maintain your own personal information, and not have people, be able to find like your home address, your real identity, with the profiles that you're using to do your research, because quickly you can find yourself a victim of being swatted, you can find yourself a victim of identity theft. There's a lot of bad things that can happen down there in the deep web. So not only is she knowledgeable into how to navigate it, to protect her own self, you have to be on your toes 24/7. So my kudos, Tammy, because again, it's not an easy job, but it's in a tremendously important work because just with the ransomware, being able to detect when these latest exfil data breaches are starting to appear or people trying to sell and make money off of this, she's doing the great work in the trenches, if you will, down there in the depths of the ocean, trying to, help people out and help companies and organizations. So again, I know I said a lot there, but like I said, just with a little bit of what she said, it's a tremendous amount of work. And thank you for being one of the, like I said, there's not a lot enough researchers and people working in this field. So for folks that are looking for something that is just exciting, demanding, and very seriously critical work, like you really want to serve industry and serve a lot of businesses, this is a path that, listen to everything she's saying in this podcast, folks, because again, this is just really tremendous work. So thank you for doing that work. I know we're like just getting started. We haven't even cracked the nut here. But anyway, Tammy, could you tell us a little bit about a day in the life? Because I know you do a lot of work, but could you just take someone through so that they have a little bit of an insight to what you do?
Absolutely. So, a day in the life of what I do is I take my job very seriously and I absolutely love my job. I wouldn't see myself doing anything else right now. And so, what I do is okay, so it's going to sound crazy, but I have two shifts basically. I split up my day into I call it European time, and then I call it North American time. So I have very, very long days. So I usually wake up 3, 4 a.m. This is like New York time and Eastern time. And basically after that, I go into what they're called trust groups. So these are very small groups of individuals on Signal or on other secure messaging applications, Telegram, for example. And these are other researchers, and some of them do not know who I am. They know I am a researcher, but we basically just discuss if anything's happening. And this is happening on European time, so they've seen already what's happening in Asia. They've already seen what's happening in Europe, and so I'm ahead of everything that's happening in North America. So I get all this information, I go back to bed, and then I wake up a little bit later, and now I'm on North American time. But I already have everything that I did a few hours earlier. And then what happens is I go into my North American trust groups and I discuss, hey, I've got all this information already, and so let's figure out what's happening. A lot of my job is to maintain a lot of relationships with a lot of different people and make sure people are happy. So if they want intelligence, so I get something called RFIs. So these are requests for informations, and I make sure that they have the information that they need. And it is like part of your like when you're doing CTI at this level, like you should know the information before you get the RFI. Like, so when you get the RFI, you're not digging for it. You're already ready to brief. Um, because you've already like that's a good position to be in because you already knew about it. You already knew like, okay, I'm good for it because by the time it cracks the news, you should know all about it. You shouldn't be blindsided by like mainstream news.
Hmm.
And so you need to know like way before. A lot of the stuff that I see weeks before it hits the news.
Hmm.
Um, so like this is data breaches, this is things like that. I see it weeks and weeks and weeks ahead. So yeah, so this is basically, and then what I do, I write a lot of reports, and then I have to do my own research because um, the part of my job is to basically show and evolve my skill set. So I do a lot of research in terms of infiltration, social engineering, and because I do a lot of like actually infiltrating the groups, so or talking to the groups. So I need to basically look and act like a criminal or like a quote unquote a bad guy. So that takes because their tactics are always changing, so you always have to stay up to date with everything that they do. The lingo as well, because how they're talking to each other and the different, and you also have to stay up to date with the different geopolitical events that are happening around the world. Because if you're pretending to be in Russia or in Moscow or like, or sorry, in Ukraine or something else like that, like you need to know what's happening over there because when they ask you, hey, I just saw, are you okay? Because you said like, oh, I live in this area and that area got bombed. Like you need to be really, really aware down to for example, like sporting events, because sometimes they'll be like, hey, I saw this like rugby match or I saw this football match. Like, what's up with the score? So, and then they'll always like, there's always like a little check that you have to like be ready for, right? So things like that, you have to stay really up to date. I have crazy news feeds all the time. And so essentially, you're keeping all of this up to date. And I take all of this information, I put it into my research, and then I get to create really interesting talks for conferences. And I get to travel and present my findings and present my research everywhere in the world. I was in Copenhagen. I went to Banff. In Alberta, Canada. I went to Berlin. Now, next, I'm going soon to Luxembourg. So I get to present at these really, really cool conferences.
Well, we're so glad that we have you working down in the trenches on these emerging threats and everything else in the dark web. A lot of folks, earlier when you talked about your schedule, you started off. I love that you started off that you have a passion for this. You absolutely love your job because that's the kind of drive and motivation it takes to really be at the top of your game. And then later, when you started breaking down that, hey, you have to be familiar with the local city, town, region, know the sports, know all the happenings and events. It's almost, and then the first thing that came to mind, I'm thinking like Jason Bourne or like a cyber James Bond. And that's so riveting and exciting that you're plugged into all these local stories and news because most people are barely aware of what's happening in their own town, much less all these locations and regions around the world. So kudos to you to just being really entrenched and what I call plugged in is the best term I'd use because it sounds so freaking cool. And again, it's what it takes, right, to get closer to the bad actors so that you can be at like level ground zero of the information, right, when it's being shared, disseminated across their networks. She already mentioned a couple of private messaging tools. There's so many tools that just serve a lot of different purposes in the dark web as well. But yeah, I mean, just hearing you talk about it, it just sounds super exciting, just almost like a cyber spy movie, if you will. So that's just really riveting to hear that. When you talk about knowing things weeks before, right? This is, in the dark web, that's where the stuff is happening. And as I said, it's so below the surface internet that by the time, as you said, the public news gets in there, we're hearing about it. It's gone, at least in the cyber communities, it's being shared everywhere, talked about on LinkedIn, etc. It's, she's already known about it for sometimes up to a year before, the vulnerabilities and things, because there's a lot of people that are trying to compromise networks with new rootkits, with new vulnerabilities, selling new malwares and so forth and exploits, and that is what's happening down there in that deep web that we talked about. That you got to know how to navigate it, and again, your time zone. So the one more thing I want to explain to folks is like, okay, you wake up and then you go back to sleep, and because I might have said it with a previous guest when we talked about vulnerabilities, but usually everything is time-based because obviously the day starts at I forget the exact location, Solomon Islands, but it's like New Zealand basically has some of the top malware exploit or reverse engineer experts in the world, usually work in like Auckland or Wellington, but usually Auckland. And what they do is because the day starts over in that region, there's some of the best folks that are there. Now there's folks around the world that have modified sleep schedules is the term I'll use that are working all together. So when something starts to be activated, they're already working on it. And so when we wake up in like the States, for example, we're already hearing about the Asian markets have been devastated by this thing. Europe is so because they had a little bit of extra time to jump on it before their workday. And of course, West Coast California, where most of the internet activity usually routes through, usually has the benefit of all of that time. And so Tammy is having to pretty much work around the clock to protect organizations and clients and protect people. At the end of the day, it's all about people and services and resources. So again, this is just 24/7 around the clock, having to maintain multiple identities and profiles, just kind of like working for like a cyber espionage type of lifestyle. So that's just a riveting, exciting thing. So with all that being said, has there been an instance where it got real scary? Because I know it can real fast, that it got real scary where you're like, hey, when I said earlier, protecting your own identity is very important. Have you had a story you could share where it got real scary?
Yeah, so you want to be careful. So there's a concept called now, this is a concept that is common in the industry. I use it. It's called family annihilation or family tree annihilation. And what it is, for example, a lot of these on the dark web, these forums, that you need a lot of reputation to have these accounts. And they're very small forums. It's a closed community, invite only. Or sometimes you have to pay a lot of money to get into these. If you don't have reputation, you have to pay money. And sometimes you have to put a deposit in the tens of thousands of dollars just to be part of this community. And this is all done through cryptocurrency. So one time what happened was because I keep a lot of personas and accounts, I had a I had an account that was in one of the lower tiers, and I basically raised the reputation of that account to gain access to another forum that had much was harder to get into, a higher level of reputation. And then what I did is I vetted myself in as another persona, as if I was like, "Hey, this is my friend. I know him very well. Come in with me." So I would have redundancy in the forum, and I would have two accounts in the forum. But the problem is that I blew my cover. This happened a few years ago, and they didn't only ban my first account, they banned the redundancy account on the higher forum, and also the original forum that I used as leverage to basically gain access to the top forums. So you got to be really careful about who you say, who you upset because what you say and who you upset because it will like completely just follow the whole family tree of your accounts and annihilate everything.
And that could be years of work, so many amounts of effort and money, as you said, and just the amount of time you invest, right, to getting
Yeah.
that set up can be gone in an instant. Yeah.
If you're good, you shouldn't have to pay for access.
I like that. So look at that. That right there is how good Tammy is. So, when it comes to emerging threats, right? Because by the time we hear it in the news, it's already been bought, sold, traded many times, and we hear things of like 0 days, and now with AI, it seems like the increase in the amount of malicious code has gone maybe through the roof, particularly in regards of maybe like script kiddie type work and so forth. But what are you seeing lately? Again, I know we're in the middle of summer of 2025 here as we're talking, but what have you seen maybe in the past 6 months that has been either increasing as an emerging threat trend, and what do you see like because we just hear ransomware, malware, this rootkits that we hear all these terms that get thrown at us all the time, but there's just some particular ones that you could say, hey, I've been tracking this and monitoring this, and this is something that people aren't talking enough about because we've been like Log4j for forever. The solar winds, CrowdStrike. We hear about that stuff, but is there something that folks aren't talking enough about that you kind of want to say, hey, here's some new information I've been tracking that people may want to add to their Google searches, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my specialty is ransomware, and so specifically the gangs and the human intelligence and the open source intelligence side of ransomware. And one thing that we're seeing right now, specifically with the ransomware gangs, is that they're starting to use and get more creative in term and way more aggressive. They're starting to use artificial intelligence, AI, now. So how these groups, because for example, let me just go back a little bit. So in 2024 compared to 2023, there's been a 35% reduction in ransom payments, just in terms of general overall volume. So that's a good thing. That means we're paying less, we're funding these groups less, which is a great thing. The amount, though, is still climbing because the ransoms are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but we're paying the ransoms less often, and which is a good thing. But the gangs, they're getting more aggressive. So one of the ways that they're counteracting this is by first of all, they're using AI in negotiations now. So what they'll do is no longer are you going to be dealing with someone who has like broken English, but you're going to be dealing with someone who can respond at any time of the day, is respond immediately, and also have a lot of information. So what they do is they feed your data, the exfiltrated data, into this AI, and they're basically engineering this model, this the agentic model, to be like supercharged at blackmailing you. And they're basically saying like, how would you extort this victim? And so now you're challenging yourself against something like that. One of the groups specifically that is currently working on this is called Global. And so this is an offshoot of another group called Blacklock. And so this is a very, very sophisticated gang. And they are really trying new innovative ways, innovative, I say in quotations. Because, yeah, so I don't condone ransomware, but I will say things like cool or innovative because as a researcher, I find
Yeah,
this
yeah.
stuff
I
fascinating.
completely get it.
Yeah, but I don't condone it. So yeah, it's a really interesting stuff. And so what another group that is right now also really interesting is Dragon Force. And so they've partnered with, I'm sure you've heard of this group, which is not really a group, it's more of a loosely affiliated like collection of individuals called Scattered Spider. So Dragon Force is collaborating with Scattered Spider. And so what the Dragon Force is trying to do is trying to start a cartel, and they're trying to basically white label the whole ransomware as a service process. And there's basically saying like, hey, if you want a brand, if you want like the infrastructure, we have it all. You just bring your brand, we'll slap the label on it, and that way you can go to town with our payloads, our malware, our ransomware, our engines, and you just do your thing under our network, and we'll take a 20% cut. Which is again really interesting because it's making things a lot easier to spin up. So back in the day, gangs would have to find a leaked like builder like from Lockbit from like 2021 or 2022 and try to spin out their own ransomware gang that way. But now you have gangs saying like, no, we'll give you the whole infrastructure right now, and you just have to like launch your attacks. So they're trying to make it easier, and it's definitely a challenge now.
And it's funny because it's kind of like I'll use the closest thing I can think it's directly relevant is how like certain defense contract companies may like put their name on it. Let's say Lockheed Martin wins the contract, but they pass it through and take their 20%, and anybody else they'll do the actual work, right? And so the fact that they're organizing at this label, folks, they don't call it organized crime for no reason. And because again, it's structured to run like a corporation. They have their tools, tactics, techniques, their SOPs, their policies. They are structured, well organized to execute this. And the interesting thing here, you hear Tammy talking about this gang, that gang. We're used to think because when we think of gangs, we think of like what the movie shows, a bunch of guys on some bikes or a bunch of folks that are just robbing people by force, or breaking and entering houses or doing bank heists. The beauty of cybercrime is that they don't even need to brandish a weapon or fire a single shot, and they could do this from miles and miles away in hidden locations. It doesn't require them to be muscular or, again, know how to do karate, martial arts, or weapons. It's just knowing how to manipulate code, knowing how to manipulate people. So social engineering is still, like the last thing I can remember, a huge social engineering effort was it was just through LinkedIn, through MGM, where a couple of sysadmins got social engineered. And again, going back to Kevin Mitnick, who's gone too soon. I wish Kevin was still with us, but as the kind of like the godfather of hacking, right? He started off with social engineering folks, right? And that's all it takes. It's a human element of cybersecurity that, we might get a lot of AI enabled security systems and tools that will help us become stronger and improve our postures and help do alerts and help us respond faster in like what we call wire speed, if you will, as opposed to human response time. But the bottom line is that it's still the human element. It takes people to, help create the data, classify the data, safeguard the data, all those things that we talk about in cybersecurity in general. But when it comes to these cyber gangs, they're looking for every avenue. So it's comforting to hear that the amount of payoffs or paybacks to get the ransomware unlocked has decreased. But like she said, the amounts have increased and they're getting aggressive because aggressive means that they're not meeting as a corporation, they got quotas to meet. There are expectations. So they have their own financials that they're trying to just exist. And the fact now you got these two powerful gangs or entities, or rather, pocket groups, if you will, that are now banding together to say, hey, but she mentioned something earlier that you enter into these groups through reputation. And because these particular groups she's mentioned have grown up to a tremendous amount of rep, think of them as like they're the Kali Linux of their world. And so by putting their rep and their name behind something and just taking 20%, people already know that they're successful. They understand their reputation. So instead of trying to figure it out on their own, it's like, hey, I don't mind giving you 20% because I'm still getting 80% of something I know that works because of the rep. And this is getting dangerous when you see, like you said, a gang becoming a cartel. This is just like, wow. It's like, and then again, I go back to it's not organized crime for no reason. And these things are, not necessarily, I don't want to go to far side of saying these are what's funding terrorism, but it has a potential to. It has the potential to fund in-person crime because these could be sub-elements of like the Yakuza or an Italian mafia or all of the traditional gangs, because a lot of the traditional, what we think of like organized crime syndicates, if you will, are having their own departments or sectors or sections where they're saying, hey, this Bitcoin stuff is for real because we see real dollars in these wallets and bank accounts. And so, again, crypto's grown real big. And that's why we're seeing a lot of push, in the US government to pass, well, they did not pass three recent crypto bills. But the point is we have a current legislation that or current executive branch that's really pushing hard for crypto to become part of our daily lives. And that's a whole nother different discussion. But when it comes to cybercrime, they work in crypto because it's decentralized. It's harder for governments and agencies to track because everything that they usually track is the individual. And because in the dark web, there's anonymity, privacy, there's ways to avoid detection and tracking. Decentralized currency is king when it comes to buying and selling these tools. Folks, if you go down dark web, you go down the dark matter Bible, you can start getting into things like credit. There's a couple links, onions that are right there in a lot of main pages where you can get to credit cards, PayPal's, wire transfers. It's insane what's immediately available to you. But again, Tammy, I'm just like sitting here just listening to you, just enthralled, and I know we could talk a long, long time about this. But what I do want to get back to before I go into the rest of the agenda questions is, a lot of different groups that you are a participant in and that you're supportive of. One of the groups you're affiliated with is Women in Cybersecurity, which is a tremendous group that's global around the world, and it's not just for women. Lynn Dom, who I've interviewed on podcasts for, is she beautifully said, "Hey, we welcome everyone to reach out to the organization. They have wonderful resources." But there's another group that you're affiliated with as well. It's Women in Tech. Could you talk a little bit more about their mission and what that organization is doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Women in Tech is essentially like women in cyber, but it's a bigger umbrella and includes project managers. It includes everyone that can touch tech, basically. It's not necessarily just like a cybersecurity role or like a programmer or a developer or an engineer. It could be anyone. When I started off my career in IT 10 years ago, I was looking for places that I could, because I started off at a help desk. I started off in a call center and tech support. So I basically grinded my way into cybersecurity. Um, and so what I was looking for was community and a place that I can network and know when the latest things are happening, the events and the conferences. And so Women in Tech, specifically in my city, Toronto, that's a fantastic resource for everyone to be able to leverage. They're always there, they're always helpful and super supportive.
And I love that word community because we're stronger together when it comes to not just being in the silos like people used to be. They would be, whatever expert in something, but they just like was lorded above everyone. But we live in a great time where there's collaboration, there's multiple groups and communities of interest sharing information and being stronger together, particularly in cyber threat intelligence. The communities are just really, really exciting times to be part of that. And folks, if you ever wanted to learn like CTI or dark web, just start a LinkedIn profile, start just immersing yourself because that's why I say just jump in the pool and just start day one of just picking a direction because again, we need everybody's perspectives, your backgrounds. It doesn't matter. There's so many ways to get into cyber, it's ridiculous. So you just pick a chart a course. At any point, you can course correct and pivot to another role, another sector of the industry, and that's it's super easy. But you kind of talked about you started off at a help desk. But if we could go back in time to that day one of the day that you made the decision that, hey, I want to go into IT and security and do all this tech stuff, is there a story there that you were willing to share with us of your day one?
So I'm a self-starter. I'm a big time. I teach myself everything. It's no secret. I dropped out of university because I couldn't afford it. And so I did 2 years in university in film school, and
Okay.
I couldn't afford it. So I needed a job, and one of the jobs that was hiring was a tech support call center. So I did that, but I've always been really good at computers. Like I was building like custom Linux desktops since I was young, and I feel like I had a Commodore 64 when I was young, and I was like programming. Like I learned Linux and Unix before I even saw my first Windows machine, because
Nice.
I was seeing like hand downs all the time. So, but that wasn't like something that really like I decided I didn't want to like be like, oh, I'm gonna go into IT. That wasn't a thing. I was just good at computers, right?
Mhm.
I took this role, and I quickly was like, okay, no, this is this is actually pretty nice. Like I understand this. I can do this. And then I worked for a few different companies here and there, and I just started working my way up. Now, that's the thing. I didn't have certifications. I didn't have, so it was purely based on my knowledge and my experience. And when people were coming out of university, like I already had a few years of experience, and I was already like moving up the ladder. And I was always the person to be like, I'm gonna work weekends. I'm gonna do this. Give me everything. I'll take it, and give me that team. I'll lead that team. And during the pandemic, when the pandemic happened, I was like, okay, well, I'm tired of IT now. Because I ended up becoming a manager of a small office for like IT and like IT manager.
Mhm.
And so I was like, okay, so I want to level up and I want to upskill. So during the pandemic, I went to back to university and I did a certification in advanced cybersecurity. Not a diploma, not a degree, just a certification. It was 1 year. And so I finished that and I was hired out of that program by the teacher. And I essentially started working for him. And from there, I got exposed to penetration testing. I got exposed to digital forensics and incident response and threat intelligence. And that's where I was exposed to threat intelligence for the first time. And I fell in love with it right away. I was like, oh, this is exactly what I want to do for the next like 20
I
years.
love it.
And so I just started to make a name for myself. and published my research. I started to put out a lot of content for the community. And just because I saw what the community was doing, I loved it, and I wanted to contribute to it. And I was like, this is what I'm seeing. This is how I can contribute to this and grow the community. And because I was taught in terms of CTI, I was taught the European way, which is everything is open source, everything is free, everything is the information flows for free. And it's like not compared to like more of the North American model of like gatekeeping and oh, you have to pay.
Mhm.
This is more of like, okay, everything is for free, which doesn't
Everything's
really
for
make
free.
sense. But that way I was able to just put everything out there and really grow my research.
I love that. Hey, I got to take a quick bathroom break, so I'm going to pause the recording. I love that story of your day one, where you're just through your own grit, self-drive, being self-motivated. Folks, that's really what it's about. Just being a sponge of, just absorbing all the knowledge, doing your research, probably countless YouTube videos. I always call it YouTube University. But if you want the knowledge is all out there. I mean, so much of these tools are pretty much like 90+% open source. So it's free, what I call no cost to low cost to start getting involved. I usually tell people use all the free stuff until you're ready to level up. And then by then you know enough about which ones are got better reputation or which ones are better than the rest, right? Because once you get in the know, you start building your own, getting involved in communities. They start sharing, hey, go this path, use this tool, use that. And again, it's just a matter of dedicating yourself to it. She worked nights and weekends and just self-taught. And the beauty of the careers you can have is that you don't need a university degree to go into these fields, right? And they're still developing, in my opinion. I believe CTI is still developing to where there's not just like one cert that gets your ticket in, so there's still multiple ways of going. I'm not trying to downplay the importance of maybe some formalized education through a degree, a program, a certificate, or some kind of a accredited course. But here's the thing: once you can demonstrate your familiarity with the tools, because it's really about what can you do, right? When you talk about, she mentioned learning pen testing. There's now, generally speaking, if you walk into a room and you got your Pen Plus from CompTIA, or even I'll use mine. I have a guy at G-Pen. I will not going to even bring it up if I'm in a group of pen testers because I know that the most of them are going to be like OSCPs. So there's certain brands and recognition that some people what I call street cred because it comes down to one critical skill is your hands on the keyboard, right? So what can you do in labs? What can you do in like CTF events and so forth? It all comes down to your knowledge and skill set, right? It doesn't matter the letters behind your name or a piece of paper at the end of the day. And so there are certain grand events. The Super Bowl of hacking will probably be DEF CON. And DEF CON, even though they usually have their big event in Vegas, there are DEF CON events in every region. And then there's of course their what I would call a partner type of event is Black Hat. So Black Hat has a lot of global recognition. But again, if you go to DEF CON, that to me is the Super Bowl of hacking, in my opinion. But there's also other groups, associations, and clubs and other nonprofits that you can get connected to also get exposure to that. So again, community, people, it's all about people and sharing knowledge and information. And again, Tammy, the fact that you kind of said, hey, I want to upskill, that is such a powerful thing to say. I'm ready for the next level. And the fact that you did that and look at you're at the top of your game and in your field in this regard. So you're an amazing story and an inspiration to a lot of people out there. So no matter what you're thinking, you could be someone that's in their 40s. Hey, some of the greatest success stories in so many careers, there's no age range. You could start in your teens, your preteens, you could be 40s, 50s, 60s and make that pivot and start a whole new adventure and journey in your life. That's the beauty of free will, and that's a whole nother discussion about career choices. But again, Tammy, thank you for making the choices you made. I'm sure you mentioned COVID and you took that opportunity to really immerse yourself into a new career direction, and I love that. But along that career path, I'm sure you've either had colleagues, managers, coworkers, associates, and maybe even there's been rock stars in the industry that you admired when you got started. Say, hey, I'd like to be like this person, or people that have had a positive impact on you throughout your journey so far. And so, what this question is more of a paying homage to these folks that have had a positive impact on your career. So it's not meant to be a name drop session. It's meant to be say, hey, this professor or this manager or this colleague. You already mentioned the professor that got you your first job, but are there names? Think of it like your Oscars moment of like what these people have had a very tremendous impact on my career so far.
Yeah, so when I was first starting my CTI career, which was 2022, I saw this woman on LinkedIn, Anastasia Sentsova, and she was publishing around 2023. She was publishing some really amazing work. And I was like, oh my God, another woman doing CTI. Because all the people around me were ex-military, ex-law enforcement, they were ex-government, ex-intelligence. And I was like, okay, that's amazing. But I wanted that model to look at. So she was definitely one of my big role models. And also just like generally other people in the industry that like these are the people that I can't name that have also like given me like from the very beginning the time of day. And when I was just starting off, and they're really high. I can't name them, but they were like, "Look, I'll answer your question. There's no such thing as a stupid question. We need more people." And so what I'm doing is I'm doing returning the favor. So I answer all my DMs. There's no stupid questions, and I try to make that platform for the next generation because we need more people. Also, like, it's also really important for me to make space for women in cybersecurity. So I have this like briefing, this weekly briefing that I do. It's called TI Friday. And since March, since I've been doing it, every single guest, if it's not myself, has been a woman so far. And and that's a weekly show. So I'm very proud of that. We are going to be hosting some really, really special content creators and people online soon. So really, really proud of that.
Well, if you'll definitely share the link with me, and folks, before you pause and want to hit your Google search, I'll have the link to save you that Google search below. Check it out, support it. This woman is amazing here doing the work that she does, and then bringing you more perspectives, more insights via this channel. It's a podcast.
No, it's on Discord. It's a very short,
Oh,
like 30-minute threat intelligence briefing. And I do it weekly. It's every Fridays. And it's on the Flare Academy. So every week I do it.
excellent. So we'll get you the link for that Discord and any other information and any other links you want to recommend. So with that being said, someone watching this right now going, I'm sold. I want to start learning this stuff. And for some people they can get overwhelmed because sometimes we get overwhelmed with too much information, and some people just like get excited, but then they shut down because they're like, I don't know. They get that maybe it's called paralysis analysis, where they just like, I don't know what's step one though. What is step one? So what would you recommend because I know there's so many sites, so many YouTube channels, so many blogs and resources. But if you had to say, hey, that are super user friendly, where it's like maybe the 3 foot deep end of the pool, what are some resources or sites or so forth that you would say, hey, if you wanted to like start getting your toes in the water, this is some places you recommend. And if you can't think of them all now, obviously any links you're going to provide me is going to be put in the description below.
So instead of providing you with specific resources, because those change all the time, I'm going to
True.
give you a perspective on how to get started. And it's about because essentially threat intelligence, you're learning about groups, you're learning about different things. It's very important to learn the lore of what's happened before. So one thing that is actually pretty recent is like ransomware is pretty new. And
Mhm.
so you don't have like decades and decades and decades and decades of history to learn. You pretty much have 10 years to catch up on. And really the big events started with like WannaCry in 2017, right?
Yeah.
And things like that. So like there's not like realistically like start with WannaCry and learn what made WannaCry so devastating and learn why because that will open up the path to shadow brokers and exploits and 0 days and blue keep and eternal blue and then that will because CTI is all about researching, right? And if you can start to follow the thread and figure out, like, okay, this is what's next, this is what's next, this is what's next, and you find that you have that hunger and you have that passion for it, that's really like all the resources are out there for specifically for WannaCry. So learn about WannaCry, and then that will give you the thread to modern day of what is happening today.
And I love that. Thank you for the, that the lore is super important, right? And so I want to just take a moment to shout out to CSI Linux because, there's so many tools and platforms that you can use. It's a free tool resource. It's the Digital Forensics Toolkit. A lot of folks may have already heard of Kali Linux and think of that of more as the pen tester's toolkit for offensive and defensive purposes. But then you got the Digital Forensics Toolkit with CSI Linux, and they're doing tremendous work there where you can build incidents, case files, learn how to do, OSINT, open source intelligence, and other great work. So, and they're free. I'll have their link in the description below for folks that want to check that out. I know that we could talk for hours. I want to respect your time, Tammy, but I do want to just say thank you for doing the work you do. I know I've already said it earlier, but again, the work you do is tremendous. And folks, this is a testament, and just that it doesn't take much to just start getting involved. But once you commit, like Tammy's all in, right? Once you commit, you could just do phenomenal things servicing an industry that there's not enough people in this doing CTI, doing the emerging threat work because it is sorely needed because companies are getting owned every day. And we'll never hear about most of them because it's an embarrassing thing. Think about it. If you got robbed, right? There's two kinds of thoughts on it. You want to tell the world and go to your social medias, but for a corporation that's been robbed, that's going to be devastating to their stock price, to their stakeholders, shareholders. They want to contain those bad news, right? Accentuate the positive, downplay the negative, right? So we might not even hear about data breaches until legally their legal teams have vetted how many, because I laugh like OPM when the government had all their top secret clearance record investigations hacked years ago. They kept updating the number because whoever was running their public affairs was doing a horrible job. But they were waiting for, I guess, for legal people to say this is the number that we can survive a civil suit on. But that's what it was because no hacker just says give me 60,000 records. That's it. They're going to exfil everything. Once they're in the vault, they're going to take every single thing they can get because they don't know what it is yet. They're just exfilling data. So when it came to the OPM hack, I said they got all my clearance records, including mine. I have an SF-15 on file with the government, so they got my information too. So it was like I don't care about the number because a lot of people in my groups are talking. Oh well, there's a chance that they don't have my record. Like they got everybody's records, man. Just accept that. So same thing when you hear of like, let's say you're a customer like Chick-fil-A or Burger King, McDonald's, and you hear about a breach where so many customer credit cards, just already assume by default you're part of that group. And so my advice to people is when you hear about just, hey, get in the practice of just every so many months switching out your card numbers, right? And it's sad to say because most people are like, oh, that's so inconvenient. I gotta like, disable my card, request a new one, and it takes time to do all that. But that's part of life. You either want to become a victim, a potential victim, or do measures as an individual to protect yourself. But because you can't always trust all these organizations, because if you think of like one Visa, you're a customer of 100 plus customers, your subscriptions, your grocery places you shop, your gas stations you fill up. All these interconnected networks run their data through some intermediary. And as we hear more and more and get more details on some of these data breaches, you get a customer at one gas station, and now you're part of a big data breach that's now being sold on the dark web to include your credit card information and so forth. So again, it happens all the time. And Tammy's one of those researchers that's working just night and day, literally working night and day, all hours to help protect and safeguard all of the rest of us, if you will. So it's just tremendous work. Tammy, I have a moment on my podcast where I call my moment of levity. And so for all my guests, I ask these rapid fire questions where there's no right or wrong answer. It's just for fun. And so if you'll humor me, I'm just going to throw some questions at you. And the first answer comes to mind, just shout, say it out. Ready? So this one
Oh,
splits the
good.
room. So for most people in cyber and tech, this one splits the room. So Star Wars or Star Trek?
None.
None. Hey, I've had a few
None.
people that said none. Have
Yeah,
you seen the new Star Trek or any of the Star Wars?
I was never, I didn't grow up with that. I'm a huge astronomy nerd, but I actually never grew up watching Star Trek or Star Wars. If I had to choose one, it would be Star Wars because I've seen more of that universe in terms
Okay.
of movies.
Okay. Cake or pie?
Ooh, pie.
Hot or cold pie?
Cold pie, cold apple pie.
Cold apple pie. I love it. A great answer. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
No.
No, it's not a sandwich. All right. And then what has been your most favorite book of all time that you've read? And was the last book you read?
So the last book I read was Capital by Thomas Piketty or something like that, and that was took me forever to finish. And the my favorite book is The Singularity is Near by Ray Kurzweil.
Oh, yeah, good book there. So if you give me the links for those, I'll put them for folks to go check out those books. The next question I had for you was a lot of us, you're super busy, and when you talked about your sleep schedule and having to basically be plugged in pretty much a 24/7, I know it's a very demanding work that you do, but a lot of us in the industry, we try to make time to support nonprofits and organizations that are doing good in the world, right? Nonprofits, charities, and volunteer work, whether we give of our time, our energy, or contribute financially. Is there any organizations that are near and dear to your heart that you want to shine, what I call shine a light on this podcast?
Yeah, so I'm a huge animal lover, so I try I've only done it a couple of times, but I should do it more. But I really try to volunteer at the Toronto Humane Society. So this is for like dogs and cats and stuff like that. So yeah, I would say go to your animal shelter and volunteer.
Wow. And the recent Superman movie, it was really encouraging to hear about the number of Google searches for dog rescues and so forth. I think 500+% have went up for Google because of Crypto the dog in that movie. And I love when good positive things like that happen in the world and on social. The I think we're wrapping up here. I'm trying to think of any other questions to ask you because I know we could talk about so much, but so what I'd like to do is this is where we're going to give you this moment to have the final word, and so whatever you'd like to talk about or say, advice you want to give, tips, etc., the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast. This was a fantastic show. So one thing I would say is like CTI is absolutely one of the like most rewarding jobs that you can have. And like it is one of those jobs that it's hard to start into it. You sort of like fall into it, to be completely honest. And like it's hard to just get your first job as a CTI analyst or as a CTI researcher. What you'll end up doing is because it's such a multidisciplinary job that you need to know how to write, you need to know how to research, you need to know network security, you need to know basics in penetration testing, basics in coding. You need to diversify your skill sets first. But I don't want to detract people from pursuing CTI. What I would say is recommending in terms of how, if you get into CTI, is you look at the open source projects that are already out there and contribute to them, volunteer on them. My favorite one is RansomLook, and I'm one of the members of RansomLook. Um, and like copy our GitHub and start experimenting with it. And if you find new onions, post them online, share them with the community. That is the best way to get noticed. And once you start putting out analysis and you're consistent with your analysis and you're consistent with your distribution of content, that's when people are going to start noticing you. And that's when you're going to be like, okay, like, let's talk.
Yeah.
How do we get you on our team? So that and that comes fast. So it's all about consistency. It's not about having a one-hit wonder, like a one post that goes viral. It's about having the consistent like mid-tier posts all the time, that will get you noticed way more than having one big viral post. So don't chase virality, chase consistency.
I love that. Consistency, the human element, networking, collaboration, it's all part of that career field and it's exciting. It's at what I call the front lines. So again, Tammy, thank you for being part of that great fight for all of us. And again, in the world of in the world of cyber, in the context of cyber, you are a cyber hero. So thank you for the work that you do. And
Thank
thank
you
you
very
for
much.
your time on the podcast.
Thank you.